I'm again to introduce you to the wonderful gentleman that is Mr. Stuart Atkins, and of course his memories of show business and all the stars that he's been lucky enough to work with. It's funny, you know, when you meet up with people like Stuart, because you realise that your paths have crossed over the years. You worked with the same people, sometimes share the same memories, sometimes not all of them sweet as you may think. I'll leave that one there. But of course, it's about you, the people out there, as Norma Desmond said, in the dark, whose memories are really interesting. Because when I see your comments about, you know, people who, I remember somebody recently writing how they'd met Bing Crosby or they lived quite close to him, and I was thinking, wow, what a childhood you must have had. So those are the things that interest me, and that's the reason why we like to interview occasionally people who've had such a checkered, wonderful and interesting career. Just because maybe the spotlight didn't shine brilliantly on them as solo, as many people may have thought, quite literally they were there living it, behind the scenes, making it happen, and of course making that star one of the biggest to shine brightest in that particular period. So without further ado, let's meet Mr. Stuart Atkins one more time with another wonderful memory. And as ever, let me know what you think to this particular celebrity memories in the comments below. Okay, I have to touch on one person that really a lot of people don't remember that he did this, but you touched on Stuart Damon.
Yes.
His name, from the Champions.
The Champions.
And I kept saying, no, he did turn up to Batley.
He did.
What was the memory like of that? Because he was massive in that team.
Actually, I got on very well with Stuart Damon because when he came to Batley, his musical director was Johnny Hawkins. Now, we knew Johnny because Johnny had been as MD for Cilla Black. And at that time, I'd just formed the big band. Oops. I'd just formed the big band, and they arrived early because we used to rehearse on a Sunday morning with the big band, and the three girls who were the Deb set, the dancers and singers, but then they changed. They started singing with the band. They were dancers originally, but I sort of knocked them into shape, not physically. And they were singing when Stuart Damon and Johnny Hawkins arrived early. So they sat in the bowels of the theatre club listening. And when we'd finished the rehearsal, John Hawkins came to me and says, "Your band sounds great, Stuart." I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "And those girls," he said, "they're good." He said, I said, "Yeah, they're not bad, are they?" He said, "Have they got a recording contract?" I said, "Well, no, they're resident here." He says, "Do you think they'd like one?" I said, "That's the daftest question I've ever heard. Of course they would." And so he said, "And that song, I don't know that." I said, "No, it's one of mine." "Oh, is it published?" "No." "Can I publish it?" "Yes." So the outcome was he signed the girls to a recording contract. He signed me to a writing contract. And a few weeks later, we were down in London and they were doing 2 tracks that I'd written. And it was a song called People Ask What Love Is. And it was released. As it happens, Dorothy Solomon, a very, very fine agent in London, who was the Bachelor's agent, I got a phone call. And she said, "I'm listening to," we'd changed the name from Debset to Cool Breeze. And she said, "I'm listening to a record with one of my artists, and he thinks it may be the 3 girls from Batley." She says, it's a group called Cool Breeze. I said, "Yes, it is." "Ah, well, the young man who was listening to it was Con Kluski of The Bachelors." And he said, because he'd seen my name as the writer, and he thought, "I bet these are the girls from Batley," and it was. So what happened, she signed the girls. They left Batley, they went on the circuit, doing theatres, cabaret, etc., and summer seasons and that. I went down with them when she signed them. While I was there, her husband, who was the boss man really, he was the power behind the throne, Phil Solomon, he owned Major Minor Records at the time, and they'd had a #1 with Karen Young.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's Child.
Yeah.
Was it Karen Young? I think it was.
I think it is.
And so they signed, and of course, as all show business, always people and hanging around. I was talking with Phil Solomon, and he said, "No," he said, "well, you might do something with The Office sometime." And so I said, "Yeah." Well, you take it with a pinch of salt. Yeah. The girls left Batley. This is now 1971, I think. Yeah, 71, 72. It was summer. They left Batley. I was still at Batley playing trombone and leading the band and running my big band. And it was November. They'd signed in the summer, and come the November, it was a Saturday evening, and it was the interval, and I was just waiting to go on stage to play the last show of the week for Roy Orbison. And the stage manager said, "I've got a phone call for you." I answered the phone. It was Phil Solomon. He said, "You remember when we signed the girls, we talked about you doing something for the office?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well," he said, "I'm thinking of hiring an arranger and MD for most of our acts." Of course, they had the Bachelors, they had quite a few. They had Lena Zavaroni later. But he said, "Yeah, fine." He said, "Would you be interested?" I said, "Can I ever think about it?" He said, "Oh, that's a pity. I wanted you to go to Mexico on Friday." I said, "I'll do it." So I told Corrigan. I told Corrigan. I told him what had happened, and what he wanted me to go to Mexico for was to conduct for a young man that just signed and had a worldwide hit with a song called "Mother of Mine," and it was Neil Reid, a young Scottish kid. Opportunity Knocks. And he was due to perform at the gala performance at the end of the Augustin Lara Song Festival in Mexico City. Now, I didn't know anything about Neil Reid. However, I know about musicians and what so-and-so's we can be if the fellow waving his hands about is not very good. So I got him round the piano. I said, "Look," he was doing about 4 or 5 numbers. I said, "This is what happens," and blah, 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 blah. I said, "So we're doing it now. Do not do anything different," I said, "because there's going to be an orchestra in there, and if we show any sign of weakness," I said, "they'll have me for breakfast." And of course, I'd directed the big band, etc. We got in there, and it was a 70-piece symphony orchestra. And I said, "Remember." So I went in, and it worked.
He was only a young lad, wasn't he?
He was 12 years old.
Yeah. I mean, you forget that. You know?
Yeah, he was. Actually, he was very good for what he was.